one moment that really stuck with me was we'd organised this big football match, and there was like hundreds of kids, and it was crazy, all running around, kicking balls everywhere, and it was loads of fun. And there was this group of children sitting on the side, not joining in. And I went over and to speak to them, and I was like, "Why aren't you joining in? Is this not fun?" I was like, "Are you bored?" And this is me with my, Western hat on. I'm like, "Are you bored? Is this games that we're organising not fun enough for you?" And they said, "No, we haven't eaten in a few days, and we just don't have the energy to run around." And it was then in a moment where I was like, "Oh, wow, okay. Yes, we are doing this great thing. We are giving children fun and joy and laughter and love and care, and those things are so important, but actually there is so much more that needs to be done here. There is so much need."
I'm really pleased to welcome Olivia onto the Charity Changemakers podcast today. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
That's great, brilliant. And always like to give the guest opportunity in the first instance to introduce yourself properly, to give us sort of a 1 minute who you are and what you do.
So my name is Olivia Barker White. I am co-founder and chief executive of Kids Club Kampala, which is an international children's charity. I'm also a trustee of the Small International Development Charities Network, SIDCN for short, and I also sit on the UK Small Charities Advisory Panel, which is hosted by the NCBO. Yeah. So I'm passionate about small charities, but just about the charity sector in general.
That's great. And there's going to be lots for us to unpick from your experience through the conversation. But before we get to the big stuff, we have these quick fire questions where we get to know our guests a little bit better. So what does a good weekend or a day off, however regularly they come round for you, what do they look like?
Well, to be honest, they're quite few and far between. So obviously being a charity chief exec, but also I'm a single mum to 3 young children. So to be honest, day off work often looks like wrangling kids at the playground or something like that. But if I get a moment to myself, which is not very often, just prioritizing catching up with friends or doing something restful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, indeed. Like I say, with alongside the day job, 3 young children, it's there's a lot going on. So I love this question now. I think I've grown into this question as the seasons moved on, and heard some really lovely answers. But what's something small that brings you a disproportionate amount of joy?
I love this question, recently I've been trying to be really intentional about noticing those small moments of joy. I've just quite recently been through a difficult personal situation, and I've had a little bit of time off work because of that. And sort of coming out of that, I've been really intentional about just noticing those small things that spark joy. So literally walking past some flowers and they smell lovely, or hearing a bird tweeting, sitting down with a really good book or a really good cup of coffee. It's just, being really intentional about noticing those little things that bring joy has been really, really helpful. And so it's a lovely question. I love that.
Yes, yeah, that's right, indeed. In fact, we did we had a webinar a few weeks ago on for charity leaders about refueling, about one of the ways to refuel yourself. We had a coach on there, Tim. One of the things he talked about was actually, when you're going out for a walk or you're going out, you're doing something, actually remove the headphones and just be aware of things that are happening around you. Because I think
makes
so often
a big difference. I think there's such a pressure to be productive all the time, and I've definitely had that. If I'm just going for a walk, it's like, well, I've got to be listening to a charity podcast, so I'm learning and growing. And actually, it's no, you can just chill and do nothing and enjoy nature and refuel.
Yeah, indeed. Although, having said that, I do know that there's a number of people that do listen to this podcast when they're on their dog walk. But they may well be all unplugging as but we encourage you to get to the end of the pod. Oh, and this final question is brilliant as well. I mean, what's one thing people always assume about your job that just isn't true?
Several things. I think the thing that people assume about my job, which I find quite annoying, is people often say things to me like, "Oh, I couldn't do that. It must be so hard," or we work with children in Africa. I just couldn't do it. I just want to take them all home. And it's so patronizing. I feel like you would never say that to a charity leader that was working in, I don't know, in sort of with homeless families in the UK or working with sick children in hospital. You'd never say, oh, it must be so cute. You want to take them home. It's very patronizing. So I don't know why people feel it's appropriate to say that when speaking about children from developing countries. And also, to be honest, not that much of my job is sort of frontline facing. I'm, obviously behind the scenes working on strategy, funding, and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I find that a little bit frustrating, but also, yeah, a bit patronizing that, yeah, an area for education for people, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we might pick on things like that through the conversation as we go. So, and look, this always feels like a really big question, but I'm always interested as people's journey into the charity sector. It's very rare that we talk to someone who was like, yeah, I knew from a young age this is exactly what I wanted to do. So, how did that step into the sector work or come about for yourself?
Yeah, so it's interesting, really. So I suppose, as you just said, I did know from a young age it's what I wanted to do, but I didn't understand when I was younger that the charity sector existed or that careers or jobs existed in the charity sector. I'd always been interested in volunteering as a child and as a young person. It's very shaped by my experiences growing up. So my mum in particular was very involved with our local community, did lots of volunteering in the local area at our local church. She was a local brown owl, ran our brownies group. So that had kind of always been a bit instilled in me. And sort of the older I got, when I had other friends at school were pursuing sport or drama or music, I was there helping at the homeless shelter. And, that was sort of like my teenage hobbies, which is a bit weird, really. But I just always had a passion for that, but I didn't understand at the time that could be anything outside of just an interest, or I didn't understand that the charity sector was a very worthwhile and rewarding career. And I'd always, again, when I was at school, I'd always been really interested in geography and, subjects where you kind of learn about the world and other cultures and other countries. And I'd always been desperate to sort of travel and see the world. And I knew that I wanted to use my sort of passion for volunteering and for helping with different causes in the UK. I knew that I wanted to do that overseas. And again, I had no idea that international development or, aid work or anything even really existed. I didn't know that, the school I went to was very much like you pick, you do that online test and it tells you, oh, you're going to be a vet or you should be a lawyer or, what, there's no understanding that all these different careers and sectors that are out there. So I wasn't thinking about it in terms of a job. I was just thinking about it in terms of this is what I'm interested in doing and I'm passionate about doing. And so before I went to university, I did a gap year volunteering overseas, and I ended up in Uganda, and sort of that's how my journey started, and the rest is, as they say, is history. I'd done a couple of other small, shorter, like overseas volunteering things before that.
Yes.
And I knew that was something I was passionate in. But again, it was very much, this is what I'm going to do on my gap year. This is a boxed in period of time that I'm going to do this. And then I'm going to go to uni and then I'm going to start my career. I wasn't necessarily expecting, I wasn't doing a gap year to help a career or anything like that. I was just doing it because it's something I wanted to do and something I felt passionate about, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had this conversation a couple of times now on the podcast about the power of the gap year. and I don't know, we must have done about 45 of these podcasts by now. And at least a quarter of people have talked about, a gap year or time overseas, typically in Africa or in Asia, and the difference that has made and opened a young person's mind to a whole bigger world and opportunity and seeing need and wanting to respond. It's such a powerful tool, and seeing, less of these sort of gap year programs around now than what were around 20 years ago. It's really interesting.
I mean, it's interesting because probably there being less of these programs around probably is a good thing, and I've seen lots of examples where it's done very badly, and I completely disagree with the idea of voluntourism. And yeah, I've seen things done very unethically. And at Kids Club Kampala, we made a decision a couple of years ago that we no longer take international volunteers just because we felt that we couldn't do it in a completely ethical way.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't sort of on paper, sort of theoretically, I don't necessarily think international volunteering and gap years is necessarily a good thing for international communities. But then from a personal point of view, it's absolutely transformational. It absolutely transforms someone's life. So I think it's definitely looking at it that way rather than sort of, it can so easily lean into sort of the white saviorism that, oh, I'm going to go change the world, go and help this poor village in Africa. Whereas actually, if you're going in with a mindset of, I'm here to learn and help where I can, but actually it's going to have the biggest impact on me and change my life and impact what I'm going to do and impact my career, then I think that's a much, much better way coming into it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess with reflection now, it's great to look at that. I guess I'm interested in your mindset as a 18, 19-year-old rocking up in Kampala and in Uganda, and seeing all of what you were suddenly experiencing and wanting to respond and do something.
Yeah. I mean, I hadn't traveled much particularly at all. It was my first time being in Africa. It was my longest time ever being away from home, and that was challenging within itself. This was back in 2007, so the internet hadn't really even come to Uganda, and we sort of kept in touch by writing letters, and once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks, I would make a very long journey into town to find an internet cafe to send an email to my mum. It was, it was completely different to experience that young people would have today when you can just FaceTime someone instantaneously. But yeah, so it was a huge challenge, culture shock, just, going so far away and not being in touch with people. But I certainly how I was feeling at the time, I was very excited. It's something I'd wanted to do for a really long time. I was hugely passionate about wanting to get stuck in and make a difference and help where I could. And I went with a gap year organisation that I knew that sort of someone had recommended to me. And I hadn't really much idea of what to expect. We had a little bit of training before we went, but not a huge amount. And I was placed in a team. There was 6 of us from the UK and Ireland. There were 6 of us placed in a team, and then we were sent to Uganda to do this gap year for best part of the year. And the gap year organisation that we went with didn't actually have any of their own programs or bases or anything on the ground in Uganda. We'd raised a huge amount of money to get there. And then when we got there, we were just sort of plonked somewhere and didn't really hear from the gap year organisation again. And from speaking to various people who've also done gap years, that's quite a similar experience for many people. But where we were placed as this sort of gap year team, we were placed at a high school on the outskirts of Kampala. And in Uganda, school's not free. So the pupils at this secondary high school were pretty well off, because if you can afford to go to school, you're vastly better off than the majority of the population. If you can afford to go to secondary school, you're even better off than people who can only afford primary. The statistics in terms of the number of children that only complete primary school and then drop out are huge. But also, this was a boarding school, so if you can afford to go to secondary boarding school, you're pretty well off compared to the majority of the population. And the pupils at this school were lovely, made some really wonderful friends, but we were supposed to be teaching. And I was 18, I just finished school. I got an okay A levels, but I was not in any way qualified to teach.
Yes.
But also, this school had adequate, good quality, qualified teachers. We weren't in any way needed.
Yeah.
And spent the first few weeks trying to find things to do, really, and join in. And it was fun. But I felt that at the time, I felt that I was there and I wanted to make a difference and I wanted to help and I wanted to be useful and had all this free time to do something. And so long story short, but met some wonderful Ugandan friends and kind of expressed this frustration to them a little bit, that we're here, we want to see the real country, and we really want to get stuck in it and help, and we've got all this time and passion, surely there's something we can do. And met some wonderful friends, one guy in particular called Sam Wambayo. He was the nephew of the head teacher of the school.
Yeah.
And so he was living with his uncle, sort of doing odd jobs around the school and things like that. But again, he didn't have a huge amount to do, and so kind of became this unofficial member of our team. And as we got to know him, he told us more of his story. And he'd had a very, very challenging childhood, had grown up in very difficult circumstances. He lost his parents when he was young, and he was passed around from different family member to family member. He didn't take good care of him. And he spent some time growing up in the slums in Kampala and in different places. And he shared his story, and it was really heartbreaking story. But despite all of the challenges he'd been through, he just had this real passion that children in similar circumstances didn't feel alone.
Yeah.
Because the overwhelming thing that he'd had is, yes, he'd gone through this awful poverty, hunger, hardship, but he just hadn't felt loved or wanted. So there's this passion that children, regardless of the situations they're living in or whatever they're going through, can have a safe space to go to, safe people that care about them, and they just know that they're loved and they're accepted. And that was his passion, and that was his vision. And him and a couple of his friends had started going into one of the biggest informal settlements in Kampala, and had started trying to just meet with the children and show them a little bit of love and a little bit of care and a little bit of joy. And because, as I said, we were on this gap year, we had a lot of passion, a lot of spare time, a lot of energy. You have a lot more energy at 18 than you do, certainly than I do now. We just started joining in with what they were doing. So whenever we had free time, which was, to be honest, almost every day, we would start going into the slums in Kampala and just joining in with what they were doing. And we called them Kids Clubs, which is where our name comes from. And we'd just go into these communities, we'd take footballs, we'd take those massive play parachutes, skipping ropes, sweets and balloons, and just have a load of fun with kids. There was no strategy, there was no plan, there was no purpose. It was just, we're here, we want to be helpful. Here's some kids in need. Let's go and do what we can. And, I don't have a lot of resources or even skills particularly, but I can run around and be silly with children and have a great time. And so that's what we did, really. And that's sort of the origin story of Kids Club Kampala, of where it came from.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really, really fascinating. Like you say, just, meeting kids where they're at, and, bringing that fun and that joy. So you've got this gap year, and I guess, like you say, there's the seeds of something here for growing. But what came next? So presumably the gap year comes to an end. You come back to the UK. Is that then straight onto university?
Yeah. So the gap year finished, came back to the UK. I'd had a wonderful time on my gap year, but for me, that was kind of like that chapter was closed, really. I'd done that, had a great time off to uni. And I was going to study economics at university, but actually changed and ended up doing international development, because I wanted to learn more about, the economies of developing countries. And after my first year of university, me and two of my friends from my gap year, so the three of us, we had originally planned to go traveling together, and we were going to go to India and sort of Southeast Asia, and we were going to go traveling. And then I can't exactly remember why, but we decided, actually, before we do that, we're just going to go back to Uganda for a few weeks, because we just missed it and we wanted to go and see our friends. So we decided to go back to Uganda in the sort of summer break after first year of uni. We went back to Uganda for a few weeks. We didn't go with the gap year organisation, just went by ourselves, and went to stay with some friends that we'd met while we were there, and didn't have any plan of what we were doing. We were just going to visit friends and sort of see the country. We missed the food, And while we were there, we went back into the informal settlements in Kampala that we'd been doing this work in, because our friends had tried to continue doing these kids clubs when they could. by that time they were working, so they kind of were doing it on the weekends and in their spare time. And we went back in one Saturday, and we joined him in this kids club again. And there was this one moment that really stuck with me. Was we'd organised this big football match, and there was like hundreds of kids, and it was crazy, all running around, kicking balls everywhere, and it was loads of fun. And it was like a whole day of games and sports, and there was this group of children sitting on the side, not joining in. And I went over and to speak to them, and I was like, "Why aren't you joining in? Is this not fun?" I was like, "Are you bored?" And this is me with my, Western hat on. I'm like,
Sure.
"Are you bored? Is this games that we're organising not fun enough for you?" And they said, "No, we haven't eaten in a few days, and we just don't have the energy to run around." And it was then in a moment where I was like, "Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah.
Yes, we are doing this great thing. We are giving children fun and joy and laughter and love and care, and those things are so important. But actually, there is so much more that needs to be done here. There is so much need. We are trying to bring fun and games, but children can't even access that because they don't have basic things like food." And then also, the more we kind of dug into it over that few weeks, it was sort of like, well, this child over here, they're actually living on their own. They haven't got parents. They're sort of living on their own, looking after their brothers and sisters. Or this child over here, they're actually homeless. Or this child over here, they've gone through this awful situation of abuse. And the more we kind of uncovered these stories, it was just like, oh wow, there is a lot here. Starting a charity was absolutely the last thing on my mind. It hadn't even crossed my mind. What I did, I was 19 at this point. What I did, and I was very much like, yes, go save the world.
Yeah.
I, quite naively, but I emailed every single organisation I could think of. So I, emailed CEO of World Vision, CEO of Oxfam. I was Googling, and everyone said, "There's these children in this community, and they need your help." And I had no idea about charitable trusts or anything like that. I was literally like, "Oh, let me email WaterAid, let me email Oxfam," and I got the wall of silence. I mean, I didn't even know what I was doing, but I really felt there's such a need here, and there were no other organisations doing anything. It's changed slightly now. I mean, this is 20 years ago, and it has changed, but there's a lot of social stigma around working in informal settlements around the world, but in Uganda in particular, found there's a lot of social stigma because there's the land is contested. There's sort of, tenancy rights. They're technical. They're informal. There are, as with any areas of urban poverty, even within the UK, there are higher rates of crime and abuse and gangs and drugs and that sort of stuff. But particularly large aid organisations, they wouldn't want to work in these communities because they're sort of technically seen as illegal settlements. And this is me with a cynical hat on, but it's much harder to see results in those sorts of communities. Whereas if you're implementing a program where you're in a rural area and you're helping someone to grow some crops, it's much easier to sort of measure impact. Whereas these communities, they're very transient. People move. Sometimes parts of the communities get knocked down. It's very difficult to sort of work in these communities and sort of sustain impact. And so we found that there was no NGOs, no organisations, no real even sort of, CBOs or anything like that really working within these communities at the time. As I said, it's very different now. And so we, after a lot of soul searching and a lot of feeling very angry and frustrated and felt, okay, well, maybe we could do something. Maybe we could do something. And again, starting a charity wasn't really something that I particularly thought of, but I was a student. I went back to uni, and one thing that students have is a lot of time and a lot of energy. So just did loads of silly fundraising things and got friends involved and started raising money. But again, we weren't a charity or anything like that. It was just like, well, these kids are in need. Let's see what we can do.
You can see a need and want to respond.
Yeah. And then as as time went on, it kind of realized, oh, okay, actually, I think if we are trying to raise money and we're trying to send money overseas, then we probably need to, have a bank account. We probably need to register with HMRC, and we probably need to start thinking of starting a charity. But that was never the goal. That was never the plan. It was kind of, it happened quite organically.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we actually first registered, our friends in Uganda actually first registered as a charity in Uganda
Right. Okay.
first. So it was very much from the beginning had been done in partnership, that there was the sort of the local organisation doing the work on the ground, and then the UK charity predominantly raising funds and supporting in that way.
Yeah, yeah. And is that partnership model? Because I mean, interesting, just picking up, I guess, on the gap year conversation that we kind of led into here. That partnership model obviously been an important part of how you've built the organisation over the last how many years now is it?
Nearly 20
Nearly
years.
20, yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes, crazy. Yes, the partnership models is, I'd say, is vital to how we operate and sort of vital to our success. Everything we don't do has always been done as an equal partnership. It's not that we're a UK charity and we're deciding what projects to do and telling people how to spend their money. We are just simply enabling the great work to happen. We are just simply raising money and enabling the work to happen. We are, as an organisation, we are really, really passionate about being community led.
yeah,
And so even in, as I said, we have the partnership with our overseas delivery team. So we actually now also work in Kenya and Tanzania. So we have partner organisations in Uganda, Kenya and Tanzania. But we've been working in Uganda the longest. But within Uganda, so we have a partnership with our Ugandan team there, and we've got quite a sizable office. We've got just over 40 members of staff.
yeah, yeah.
Sam, who was the guy I mentioned his story earlier, who was the first one to introduce us to these children and communities, he's our Ugandan director. He heads up the whole team there. And he's just an incredible force of nature. But even we work in that partnership model, but our Ugandan office team work in that same partnership model with the communities that we support.
Yeah.
So again, we're not from the UK speaking to our staff on the ground saying you have to do this. We want you to work in X way on making those decisions. It's the same. So the communities very much themselves have a voice and come together and will suggest ideas for programs, or will kind of suggest, oh, actually, this isn't working. Let's try this way. Or there's a need here, and can we do this? And it's very much organic, sort of from the ground up. And so our program teams in East Africa are really committed to working directly with the communities, listening to what their needs are, responding in an appropriate way, adapting projects where needed. And that's the same attitude that we have in the UK. And I think that we would not have had anywhere near the sort of impact that we have had if we hadn't operated in that way. And to me, it's a no-brainer. It's not just the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do, obviously, but you can't run a successful organisation. There's too many assumptions otherwise. I don't know what is best for these people. People know best what they need, and often they have the solutions themselves as well. They just simply need resources and support.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and I suppose there's something about, like you say, the organic growth, and I guess being a smaller organisation where we see a lot of more traditional, I guess, larger sending organisations that are trying to shift to a partnership. That it's harder to make that change, but because you've been there on the ground, built those relationships locally, they've been able to work, and something, I guess, within the size of an organisation that means you can move quickly.
Yeah, definitely. And this is why I'm really passionate about small charities in general. They're so adaptable and resilient, and if crises happen or if something's not working, you can just quickly pivot and be able to do that. I mean, for just an example of that is we saw this during the COVID pandemic. In Uganda in particular, there was very large NGOs, very large aid organizations just completely pulled out all of their staff, because often they only have, not only, but often they have large teams of international staff.
Yeah.
They pulled their staff out, they closed programs at the time when people were suffering the most, and they just stepped out because they weren't able to do that. But for us as an organisation, being small, but also having an ear to the ground and having those relationships with local leaders and local community members, we were able to ask people, what do you need? How can we help? And what we found is during COVID, really shockingly, during the first 3 months of the COVID pandemic in the communities we work in, the vast majority of people passed away from starvation. They didn't pass away from COVID. Yeah. And so we said to communities, what do you need? What can we do? And they said, we need food. Because Uganda had a very strict lockdown. Schools were closed for a really long time. And so many people, particularly in the settlements that we work in, so many people work in the informal economy. So when there's something like a lockdown and people don't have salaries, there's no such thing as furlough. And if people's job is sort of selling things at the side of the road and suddenly they can't do that, people literally lost incomes overnight. So what we did was we adapted our centres. So we have children's centres, we have education classrooms, we have vocational training centres. They all had to close because you can't gather large numbers of people to do things. We converted them into food banks and we just started feeding people. And there was thousands, if not millions of meals that we provided, and sort of tens of thousands of people were supported through that time. And that was really only possible because we were a small organisation. We could pivot quickly, but also because we were listening and responding to the needs of those communities. Yeah. And we're seeing this a lot now. There's so much conversation, particularly in the international development space, around shifting the power. Mm. But what does that really mean? And again, we've seen this with the UK aid cuts that happened last year. We're seeing that it's when they're cut, it's the larger organisations that are just having to close programmes, and it's often the smaller organisations that are stepping up to fill in those gaps. They don't have more funding or more resources. They're just adapting and pivoting to meet those needs on the ground where they are.
And is that partly because obviously you're not contracted to deliver, you got to deliver X, Y, and Z, which gives you that bit more freedom?
Yeah, I think it does. It does definitely give more freedom. There's a lot less bureaucracy, a lot less red tape, and things can happen quicker and aren't tied into big contracts. I mean, it's not all good though. I mean, sure. It's awfully been a huge number of small charities that have closed. It's not all positive, but I definitely think, being small means you can be nimble and agile and pivot where needed.
And you built something absolutely from the ground up, from like you say, by me experiencing a need as a teenager and responding. Just talk us through that whole journey about finding. But we could probably talk for hours about this, Olivia. But which I recognise, again, is another huge question, isn't it? But founding, grafting to build something alongside, other work as well. Obviously, building that. What's that journey look like for you as an individual?
Yeah, well, again, it wasn't sort of something that I set out to do. As I said, I didn't set out to set up a charity. And even when we did set up a charity, as I said, this was while I was at university. It was very much, we were teeny tiny, and it was just something I was doing in my spare time. And I had to quickly learn how to do things that I had no idea about. And again, I think it's different these days. There's so many great resources and training and podcasts and things out there that you can kind of, listen to and learn and get ideas. But that wasn't there. So I had to sort of, learn quite quickly how to set up a website, or how to file accounts with the Charity Commission, or all these things that you don't realize you need to learn about. I was just passionate about helping people, and had to quickly realize, actually no, it's not actually appropriate. I'm not the most needed to be there on the ground hanging out with these kids and doing this work. No, it's way more useful for me to be in the UK doing the fundraising and the admin. But we were very small for a very long time. So when I finished university, I actually got a job in the private sector, but working within international development. Yeah, right. So I worked in management consultancy, but on international development programs, which, I had mixed feelings about. But anyway, that's a conversation for another day. And then in 2013, myself and my co-founder actually won an award with Cosmopolitan magazine.
Yeah.
We won
Wow.
the one of the Women of the Year awards, which was incredible, and it gave us this huge platform. And I had been working, as I said, in the international development sector for a while. In fact, had lots of frustrations about my job. And when winning this award, there was some funding with it, and as I said, quite a lot of publicity and press around it. I decided to quit my full-time job and see if I could make Kids Club Kampala a success and sort of have a go of it. I said I had a little bit of funding through this award, which was a bit of a cushion. And then I decided to sort of, have a go at focusing on it for a little while. And I think within the first few months of just focusing solely on Kids Club Kampala, our income tripled.
Right. Wow.
And I was just like, okay, wow, this is maybe something I could do. But again, it was a very long journey. That was very end of 2030.
Yeah, sure.
And then I sort of was, I went to officially being employed 1 day a week and having another job on the side. And then I was part-time and again, doing a couple of other jobs on the side. So it kind of happened slowly. And then it wasn't until 2019 that we kind of formalized a little bit more, and I officially became the chief exec.
Yeah,
and we got some other staff, and it sort of formalized a little bit more, and then kind of grown since then, really. And it's been quite organic, and we're still small, but we are a bit bigger than we were. So there's now 8 of us in the UK.
Yes, yeah. And are there, as you like you say, it's been organic. Have there been resources or people along the way that have helped support? Where is it that you've sort of, you relied on, built from, learned from, or is it, as you figure these things as you've gone?
It's very much been a learning journey along the way. I've always had wonderful, supportive communities. I'm not from a wealthy background at all. None of our sort of staff or any of our founding trustees or any of our staff are from wealthy backgrounds at all. We're not particularly connected with anyone in the corporate world or anything like that. I'd say key to our success, one thing that I bang on about all the time, and I think my team get a bit sick of me because of it, but I think we're just very good at thanking people very well. We've got an incredible community of individual givers, of regular givers, so people who have given us £5 a month every single month for 15 years. And we are just really, really appreciative of every single person that supports us. And as we've grown, we have got, we've got better at writing funding applications. We've got better at running fundraising appeals. But I do think it's kind of the core of kind of how we've grown is just communicating our impact to people really, really well. And again, that helps being small and being really agile. So if someone gives us £100 to do a particular thing, we can do that within a week or two and then send them a photo of what's happened. And then we thank them and they feel appreciated. And it just kind of grows from there. So it's not been a particular sort of, one particular donor or one particular thing, but we just, we've got a real community of supporters, I would say. And they're our biggest asset by far.
Yeah, absolutely. And the power of looking after those donors clearly is evident. So tell us a little bit about what the charity looks like today.
Yeah, so we now work across 3 countries across East Africa. Uganda is still where the majority of our activity happens, but also Kenya and Tanzania. And we sort of roughly have 3 main program areas. So the first one is around access to education. So helping children with schooling, school fees, additional school support. Our second program area is around family strengthening. So we work with families to help them increase their incomes. We do income generation work, poverty alleviation. And then kind of the third area, which is our biggest piece of the work by far, is around child protection. Yeah. So we still run these kids clubs, hence our name, but they're very much a sort of a jumping off point for children to then access our other services. So it might be that a child will come, just as it happened back in the day. There might be a child, they come to one of our kids clubs and they come to join in and they'll say, I haven't eaten for a few days, or I'm not safe at home, or, they'll disclose something, and then we've got teams that will go, and we've and teams that rescue children from situations where they're unsafe. We've got a big program where we help resettle children into kinship care or into foster families. We do lots of work sort of legally advocating for children. But I'd say one thing that, again, is really key to our success is our programs work really holistically together. So they're not sort of in silos. So it might be that there's a child who has been rescued from a situation of abuse, and then we're able to support them through our education program. And then maybe when they finished on that program, we're able to support one of their parents to get some skills to help them start up a business. So it works very, very organically, and how that works as well. And where we work in Kenya and Tanzania, it's sort of very similar, holistic program of support, very, very streamlined. And again, it's all down to our fantastic teams that actually are there every day working on the ground, advocating for these communities and supporting them.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I was having a look at your impact report earlier today, and
Oh,
the
great. Yeah,
numbers.
just newly released our impact report.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, we'll make sure in the show notes that there's links through, obviously, to the websites
that'd
people
be
can read
great.
and see. But yeah, I mean, the impact is huge. It's incredible. When you talked earlier about, wanting to take moments to reflect and to pause and to think. I mean, when you take that moment to pause and reflect on what the charity does and what it looks like now, from that passion and youth and I guess to a degree a bit of naivety at the start of we're going
Definitely.
to we're going to build something. I mean, yeah, I mean, just how do you feel when you reflect on what it looks like today?
Yeah, I think very, very proud, to be honest. Since the beginning, we've supported over 1.5 million people, and that number is growing. And I think because we've been running for about 20 years now, we've literally supported some children from when they were very, very small. Actually, quite a few of our staff members are former children that we supported in the beginning, which is lovely. And yeah, I think yeah, being proud of what we have achieved and where we are today. I don't know if it's just being young when I started or being female, but I think I've always sort of felt embarrassed of being proud of things, and always felt, oh no. But whereas actually, yeah, it is great. I mean, it's not absolutely not all me at all. We've sort of got a wonderful board, wonderful staff team, and absolutely amazing overseas partners, which I've talked about. But yeah, I think it's wonderful thinking what's been achieved, but also, thinking if we hadn't been there, then what situation may it have been instead. So I think knowing that we've helped, even if we just helped one person, but we have helped quite a lot of people, knowing that it's made a difference is very rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and certainly without a shadow of a doubt should feel proud of that, and that driving force that you and, like you say, the partners of the ground have been to make that happen. But I get that sense that it's there's no sort of resting on your on your laurels. There's that sense of there's still more to do.
Yeah, I think that's probably something that everybody who works in the charitable sector will say. Your job is never done. There's always more to do, and unfortunately, working in international development is very, very difficult. I said the UK aid cuts really hit communities really hard, but even just what's been happening recently with global oil prices increasing, and cost of living and inflation, and it's very it is very, very difficult, and it does feel that our job is never done. So that's hard, and I think that's something that I've sort of had to learn the hard way, that I'm not personally responsible for everybody.
Yeah.
And yes, the job will never be done, but it's kind of saying, okay, what is good enough?
Yeah.
And something, again, I've had to learn the hard way is just trying to be a little bit more boundary, just for my own mental health. There's definitely been times where the amount of hours that I have worked and speaking to other charity chief execs, I know it's such a common thing of feeling like you can't ever switch off because your job is never done. There is always more to do. But it's actually, I guess, one thing I've really learned the hard way is if you don't take care of yourself and your own well-being, then the charity is not going to be there for the long run necessarily. So it's, yeah, trying to have a longer term picture. Again, it's like if you spend all your funding immediately, then you're not going to have anything to invest for the long term. So it's
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a really helpful insight. I guess as sadly we have to, as we sort of bring the conversation to a close. But yeah, we'll make sure, Olivia, that like I say, that there's links in the show notes so people can come find out more about the charity, about the organisation, and assume you're happy that we sort of tag you if people want to
Yes,
reach out.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's brilliant. It's one of those conversations that I think probably we could have gone on for a few hours. It feels like it's probably. We need to invite you back on the podcast in
Oh,
12
I'd
months
love that.
or 2 years or so, and hear more about what's happening and developing. But honestly, thank you so much for your time today. It's been really insightful, loads learned, and a show I'm sure that the listeners have really enjoyed.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful.
If you've enjoyed the podcast, please do subscribe and share it with somebody else in the sector. If hearing about the career journey in this episode has inspired you, I've put together a bunch of practical resources to help you land your next ideal role in the charity sector, including support on how to put together a CV and cover letter that will really work for you. You can join for free at the Charity Careers Network, a growing community full of advice, tools and honest conversations about charity careers. Both the podcast and the network are proudly powered by Charisma Charity Recruitment. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.